Hi, everybody. I'm George, and welcome to the best little horror house in Philly, the show where we talk about the best horror movie ever made, according to our guest, at least. And today's guest is a great film critic and a co host of the excellent podcast Latinx Lens. Rosa Parra is here. Welcome, Rosa.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely my pleasure. Why don't you tell the people at home a little bit about your show?
So just like you said, I'm Rosa Parra. I am co-founder and co-host of Latinx Lens, a podcast and website dedicated to highlighting Latinx representation and contribution in film and television. So yeah, what we do, we just try to dedicate an episode. We alternate between actors and directors, and between those episodes, we also review films because we also view more movies than just the Latinx centric and created movies. So in terms of that, yeah, we just try to give our own perspective and just we just love talking about film and TV. So
And
yeah.
that's really all you can ask for.
Yes. Absolutely.
So, when I reached out to you to see if you wanted to come on this show, you
Yeah,
mentioned that horror is not something that's really your focus.
correct.
So I'm curious about your experience with horror and if there was maybe something that scared you away from it growing up, or, what the kind of things that might draw you in and intrigue you more about modern horror as opposed to,
Mhm.
some stuff that might have passed you by.
Yes. So as a little girl, and there's a reason why I selected the film that we're going to discuss in particular, particularly the telling of that story, certainly left an everlasting traumatic effect on me. And then also seeing just bits and pieces of The Exorcist at a very young age was also quite traumatic. So ever
That'll do it.
since, yeah, it was quite traumatic. So ever since then, whatever movie you can place the horror label to it, I guess, unconsciously, traumatically, just look away from it and try not to make it a priority at the time. But yeah, it's just been lately where I've been slowly, and when I mean slowly, I mean very slowly. I've been trying to open myself again to the genre and
Get the temperature of the pool, gotta
yeah,
go in
yeah.
slowly.
Yes, exactly.
Is there a subgenre within horror that you tend to like where you're like, oh, I hate monsters, but there's something about like witches that appeals to me, and
Mhm.
maybe I'm a little more likely to see this movie?
Mhm. Oh, subgenre. I think I am more inclined to watch something that's more of a psychological horror.
Yeah.
And of course, if it has a social commentary, that'd be more. I'd be more inclined to watch it. But
Sure.
yes, if it has to do with slasher films or anything like that, I probably would not be able to get in there. But yeah, I think doing Latinx Lens, we did an episode recently on Guillermo del Toro, and the way he has approached the genre, and at some point even bended and
Yeah.
kind of switched what's been already cemented as your typical horror elements in the film industry has certainly opened up the opportunity for me to watch horror movies again. So yeah, slowly but surely I'm getting in there. But yeah. Just recently, watching anything that's more of a psychological horror has been my cup of tea.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, Del Toro is really what a visionary. It's incredible the way that he really just kind of takes the little bits of horror from all over, and he
Yeah,
just says, "I'm going to mash these up into my own unique voice."
yeah.
And it's always so spectacular looking, and he just has such a vision. He's really spectacular.
Yes, and we recently also did an episode talking about the film we're going to talk right now, and we did found like little bits and pieces. We're not entirely sure, but we were able to make some connections between the film and having some of that Del Toro print into it. So yes, what he's done for the industry and for the genre in particular has certainly been fascinating.
Definitely. And I don't see any reason to beat around the bush any longer. We're getting in early on this one, folks. We're talking about La Llorona, released
Mhm.
internationally in late 2019, but became available for non festival US audiences in August of 2020. Now, to be very clear, this is not The Curse of La Llorona, the sixth movie in the Conjuring franchise, also
Mhm.
released in 2019. Very, very different movie. Rather, this is the Guatemalan release, directed and co-written by Jairo Bustamante, along with Lisandro Sanchez as the other writer. And this movie is really interesting because it takes La Llorona and brings it into a more modern age, using the classic ghost story as a base to create a story that functions both as political and historical commentary while still bringing the eerie ghost story along with it.
Yes. How brilliant is that?
Yeah. It really is. It's something that's really fascinatingly almost unique to
Yeah.
use this incredible ghost story that has such deep roots and such deep tradition and
Mhm.
really place it in such an immediate current time and place is really something else.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's what fascinates me about this film, and why I think it's one of the best horror films out there. It's, of course, it's not your mainstream horror film that's there to entertain you. If you're looking for a horror jump scare, this is not it. This has more of a deeper, more complex approach to the story, and the story within itself is so complex. And the fact
Mhm.
that Jairo Bustamante was able to incorporate so many layers, and on top of that, to bring a legendary ghost like La
Right.
Llorona into it, and to just make it, like you said, so unique, make it its own. It's something that to be honest, I rewatched it right before we started this recording, and I'm still blown away by it because it's just unbelievable what they were able to accomplish with this. And on top of that, his filmmaking technique, the approach he took, the camera shots, the slowly closing in and closing out,
Mhm.
it's just all, again, I'm geeking out over this film because it's just so amazing in general on so many levels.
Yeah, well, it definitely deserves it. But I do want to give a little bit of a history lesson for people
Mm-hmm.
out there. I did this with our Doctor Strangelove episode as well, where I think that this movie really benefits from having an understanding of sort of the path that leads to it in history. So I'll go through and my understanding of the path to kind of where La Llorona takes off. In the 1950s, American interventionism was in full swing, and Dwight D. Eisenhower had established John Foster Dulles as his Secretary of State. Now, there's two things that people need to know about John Foster Dulles, and that's one, he hated communism, and two, Allen Dulles was his brother and on the board of the United Fruit Company, which had a lot of governmental influence at the time. The brother of the Assistant Secretary of State was formerly the president of the United Fruit Company, and their principal lobbyist was married to Eisenhower's personal secretary. Up to this point, Jorge Ubico had been the dictator of Guatemala and intensified the relationship started with the United Fruit Company under Manuel Estrada Cabrera, taking lands away from indigenous peoples and creating a police state and removing labor regulations. Eventually, people had enough and enacted the October Revolution in 1944, which overthrew Ubico and began the 10 Years of Spring, a time in Guatemala where a progressive populist party was enacting social reform, including a successful literacy campaign and a largely free election process, which, of course, the US did not like,
Right.
but communist parties were still technically banned, so they let things lie. But in 1951, however, after a landslide victory in a democratic election, Jacobo Arbenz took power in Guatemala, and he took these reforms even further, including Decree 900, which was a land reform program where areas of 1,700 large landholdings that weren't being cultivated were expropriated in return for government bonds and redistributed to around 500,000 families, 1/6 of the country's population, most of whom were indigenous. So this is a huge deal, this program. And one of the landholders that sort of took a beating on this is the United Fruit Company, who owned 550,000 acres, a whopping 42% of Guatemala's farmable land. And they got $627,500 in compensation, which was the amount that they claimed the land was worth for tax purposes. But all of a sudden, they started claiming it was worth just under 16 million. Funny how that works when all of a sudden they're not having to pay tax on it.
Right.
And so, even though the goal of the legislation was to move Guatemala's economy from pseudo feudalism into capitalism, United Fruit started whispering in our government's ear that, hey, get a load of this commie. He's going to align with the Soviet bloc. And so the U.S. State Department said, yes, daddy money bags, and worked to destabilize the country, organizing a coup that led to the Guatemalan Civil War from 1960 to 1996, where the U.S.-backed military committed a host of atrocities, including the genocide of the indigenous Maya people and a litany of human rights violations against civilians and leftist insurgents alike. A substantial portion of this started in 1975 after the group Guerrilla Army of the Poor assassinated a prominent landowner, to which the military government responded with killings and repression. And then after a protest, the military opened fire on a crowd, killing between 30 and 106 people in an act known as the Massacre at Panzos in 1978, which escalated the military response, which continued to perform just absolutely heinous acts, culminating in Jose Efrain Rios Montt launching Operation Victoria 82 on April 20th, 1982. We're almost done, folks. I promise. Victoria 82 was intended to destroy guerrilla forces through scorched earth tactics, eventually labeled as genocide by a 1999 UN Truth Commission, which led to Montt being the first person charged with genocide by his own country's judicial system. And he died in custody in 2018. Now, the reason that we need to know all of this as it relates to this movie is that La Llorona is basically the story of late in life Rios Montt, affixed to the ghost story, classically about a woman who weeps for her children, which she drowned in a blind jealousy when she saw her husband cheating on her and then herself out of guilt. And the way that he manages to create something that this was the second time that I watched this movie, and I had heard that this was pretty steeped in history the first time I watched it, and so I did like a kind of cursory glance over the Wikipedia article or whatever to look it up, and I enjoyed the movie the first time, but really digging into the history of Guatemala and how much people had been through there and sort of the path that it had taken and the amount of external pressure from the US that had led to that point, it really took this movie to another level for me. You know, I had already really enjoyed it, but seeing how much of history had led specifically to that point, I mean, it blew me away in a way that, you know, there are a lot of movies that are reliant on cultural context and historical knowledge, but this is a story that doesn't get told very often. It's called the Silent Holocaust because so few people hear about this. And the way that he utilizes the wails of La Llorona to get people's attention, seeking to draw focus to this silent Holocaust and the varying levels of complicity from the top down is shocking in such an incredible way.
Yes. And well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for going out of your way to actually dig into the history of it, because it's certainly, again, I knew portions of it. I did not know the extent of it. And after listening to all of this, it does certainly give it a new perspective. And so again, thank you, because it certainly it helps a lot in terms of the film, but also in terms of La Llorona herself, the legend itself, which is one of the very few pre-colonial stories that still exists, that at the time, according to the director, and I'm quoting him, in the story of the Mesoamerican people, La Llorona was a kind of princess of divinity, almost like a superhero who cries because she has visions of the future. However, after, of course, colonialism occurred, they turned and somehow made the legend and the myth made her more misogynistic. They turned her into, yes, she killed her kids because she was jealous, and her husband, and so on and so forth, which is something, to be quite frank with you, that I did not know until just recently as well.
Yeah.
And it's always been fascinating to once you do go down that rabbit hole, you go quite deep, and then the things you do learn and how things do evolve and they do change
Yeah,
based
tale as
on
old as time. That the way
exactly.
that men sort of shift the stories and stuff to serve themselves.
Exactly. So to see that imply, and the fact that he knew this, and now that I get a chance to see the movie and see the legend itself, or see the La Llorona depicted this way, where
Yeah,
you don't hear anything about her husband, or all we hear is that she did have kids and they died, and that's it. We don't hear anything about her drowning anybody or anything like that, which is again something that's very fascinating, and certainly puts a different form of perspective to it. But yeah, it's quite frustrating to because at the moment, just to give you a little bit of context, I'm working on several degrees. I'm working on my Chicana studies, and I'm doing a minor on Native American studies. And everything that I've read and everything that I've come to learn, and these are just textbooks, and a lot of them of course are written by Native Americans, their families, their history, their roots, and just to read everything that's happened, the historical context of it,
yeah,
it's eye-opening, but at the same time it's so heartbreaking and so unfortunate. And when I learned about the indigenous genocide, particularly within the Mayan community, was just mind-boggling, because we don't know
yeah,
any of this. Nobody knows this. Nobody. This is one, unfortunately, one of those genocides that's rarely talked about. It's very rarely discussed. Not to say that this is the battle of the genocides and who has it worse or anything like that. It's not about that. It's just that unfortunately, indigenous people, again, they always get the short end of the stick,
yeah,
and it's infuriating at times. But luckily, again, this is one of the very few films that, which is why it's one of my favorites, because I think it's very important, again, on the
yeah.
historical context, and its commentary, the social narrative it has is one that's worth noting.
I totally agree, and I think that it is important. I think that that's a great word for it because so much of people's attempts to cover things up,
Yeah.
people don't pay attention in school all the time. It's sort of a history is written by the winners kind of thing, and for someone to be able to say like, no, that's not going to be the case. We're going to get this story out there, and we're going to tell it in such an impactful way that really speaks to people and sort of uses the guise of a genre film to tell this really important story and to sort of like sneak it in front of people and make sure that people do understand, and maybe it doesn't tell you every single thing so that you do have to go look it up and
Yeah.
learn a little more about it. And I think that his quote about La Llorona, and
Mm-hmm.
she really is, she's so like on the side of justice in this
Mm-hmm.
movie. And she really is sort of like this avenging force in such a positive way. And I think that that's really awesome that he is sort of trying to shift it back away from this misogynistic representation of her sort of being blinded by jealousy.
Yes.
I think that that's really spectacular, and this movie does such a good job because it would be one thing if it was just an important story, but the fact that it manages to tell this important story while also being a genuinely affecting film and incredibly well composed on a technical level,
Mm-hmm.
it's just staggering that he's able to pull all these things together.
Right, which shows the importance of representation, not only in
Yes,
terms of on screen, but behind the screen, behind the camera. It does matter who's telling these stories, because again, this is not the first time we see a retelling of this legendary ghost. We've seen it before, but we've seen it through a different lens.
yeah,
So to see it this way, it certainly gives it's just, I just love it. Just
yeah,
love it,
yeah.
love it, love it.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out that not just a different perspective, but usually an appropriative
Yeah.
perspective. It's usually white people who are telling the story and sort of misrepresenting it. But as far as this movie, budget and box office return are kind of difficult to find, compounded by the fact that it was released in the US during COVID and distributed by Shudder, which, by the way, you can still find it if you want to check it out. I highly recommend you do so. But the $300,000 international box office that I found listed doesn't really reflect the actual success of this movie, especially because as far as reception goes, it was positive. There was some pushback on its use of sort of minimalism in terms of scares,
Right.
opting to create more of like an intense and oppressive atmosphere, especially through the sound.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there's so many different kinds of horror that I think that this totally fits right in. And I don't know, the minimalism doesn't bother me at all.
Right. It obviously doesn't bother me, otherwise I wouldn't have selected this film. Yeah.
But also excitingly, we join a story in progress because not only was La Llorona recently nominated for a 2021 International Feature Film Golden Globe, it was also recently announced as one of the 15 entrants on the shortlist for the Academy Award in the same category. So keep an eye out. It just might be an Oscar winner.
Yes, I am rooting for this film.
Yeah.
It certainly has my full support. I've been raving and talking about this film. I was certainly upset that I just recently watched it a few months ago and not necessarily back when it came out last year. Because if it did,
Right.
it certainly would have easily, without a doubt, made my top 10 of 2020 with yeah, without a doubt. So
Yeah.
to see that it's Guatemala's representation, and to see it on the short list for the Academy Awards, I do hope it goes all the way. I know it's been getting some recognition and some love
Yeah.
from the smaller critic circles, and I just hope it does. I just hope it wins everything.
Yeah.
I'm hoping.
No, I really agree. I mean, I've seen a handful of the movies on the list. Another Round and A Son from
Hmm.
Taiwan were two of the other ones that I had seen, and they're both great movies in their own right. But the balancing act that this movie is pulling off, while also being just a great a movie that you enjoy watching, like it's just so well done.
Hmm.
I think that it does deserve that international Oscar, for at least from the ones that I've seen. You know, it's a long list, but I have a hunch.
Yes, I've seen a few. I've also watched another round. I actually watched it yesterday, which is kind of funny that we're
Oh, there you
bringing
go.
it up right now. I thought it was good. I thought it was okay for what it is. But
Yeah,
yeah, I've
Matt
had the
Mickelson is
chance.
good, but there's
Yeah. Yes, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to bring down any other films or anything, but
right.
I do hope that people do get to watch this film and not automatically dismiss it just because it's from Guatemala. Unfortunately, a lot of Latin American films don't get that same. They don't have that pristine or prestigious appeal as
Mhm.
European films. If we're being entirely honest,
Yeah.
it's just been recently, actually, since Del Toro and Cuaron and Iñárritu have slowly but surely brought some attention to them, particularly Mexico's filmography. But other than that, yeah, a lot of these Latin American films aren't necessarily in a lot of people's radar, sadly, which is why my podcast exists, to put it out
Yeah.
there.
Well, I also think that that's part of what makes it so exciting that this is streaming on Shudder, which I think that
Yes.
Shudder has done such an incredible job of curating picks from around the globe. I think that they do a really spectacular job. But the fact that they are making movies like this widely accessible, I maybe on Prime, but I just don't really see this movie fitting in anywhere on any of those other platforms in terms of what they tend to present or
Right.
put the spotlight on. And for Shudder to be like to say, I think that horror fans are gonna dig this, that they're
Mm-hmm.
gonna react positively to this story and this filmmaking, I think says a lot about Shudder and how much they trust horror fans, and I think says a lot about horror fans that they are reacting positively to this movie, which, you know, like we said, is minimalist, doesn't necessarily fit within the typical bounds of horror as you might expect,
Right.
but it's a great ghost story and people are reacting well to it. So
Right. It certainly is a step forward and far better than the Conjuring one, the Conjuring adaptation of it
yeah,
on so many levels. So yeah, it's certainly worth watching.
definitely.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back to the show. Hey everybody, George here, and I wanted to tell you about the membership drive we're doing for the Best Little Horror House in Philly Patreon. You hear me talk about it at the end of every episode during the plug section, but basically the Patreon is where you can support the show for just a few dollars a month while getting all kinds of great perks, including bonus episodes like spotlights on Begotten and Solaris, hot movie court action with Legal Thriller, we're doing a watch-along of X-Files and having a community discussion, video episodes, and an ad-free feed to avoid having to hear stuff like this very ad. Plus, this March, if you sign up at the $8 tier, not only are you going to get all the tier rewards we offer, we're even going to send you the Best Little Horror pin in Philadelphia. If you follow us on social, you recognize the design. And I'm not going to tell you that it's a blend of Chucky and Gritty done by the excellent local artist Zach Woomer, but I will tell you that this orange Philadelphia monster will be your friend till the end. Okay, sign up today at patreon.com/littlehorrorphl, and thanks to everyone who's already a supporter. Back to the show.
To get into the actual movie, so it opens up with just these white credits on a black screen. But as I sort of mentioned earlier, I kind of alluded to this. The sound design in this movie is so important. And although you don't see anything right away, you can already hear prayers being whispered.
Yes.
So impactful. And when we finally do get an image, it's multiple generations of well-dressed women, but things are not uniform. In fact, while the older women are praying fervently, the middle generation is looking askance and dejectedly whispering, and in the back, the youngest is silent. And as the camera pulls back, another group of women who are the workers that work for this family, the staff for their home, they pull into frame a little bit. And the whispering intensifies, and it slams to the title card. And it's this nice, quick, effective opening where you really can see that this is going to be a movie about the distinctions between class and generations. And he does such a great job of sort of priming you for these themes before you really get anything else.
Yes, that atmosphere, you immediately feel it without having to see anything, just like you said. And it all has to do with the sound. Yes, you do have the praying and the way the women are positioned, their facial expression. That's another thing. The acting in this movie,
It's great.
yes, phenomenal. And yeah, just the first shot, you immediately know it gives you the atmosphere you're going to be in with for the rest of the film. And I guess it's the fitting and the best way to open a film then with the funeral, pretty much,
Yeah.
with the awakening. So which better way to start a horror film than to do it that way?
Absolutely. And when we finally come back to the film from the title card, it's a group of men in a room being instructed on how to behave at the former dictator, General Enrique Monteverde's trial. And there are some nervous rumblings as they consider that basically any incarceration will be a life sentence for men of their age. And the decades of oppression and cruelty towards indigenous peoples have obviously also resulted in intense class stratification. This is the kind of thing that goes hand in hand. And I like how Bustamante communicates this visually right away in this hallway shot where the genocidal general and his ilk are all chattering away in the bright lighting, but when it cuts, it's dark and the staff of the general are quietly moving through the hallways. And they just do same thing as the intro sequence where, this sort of separation between the people who work for the general and the general's family is just so well communicated.
Yes.
It's great.
Absolutely. And the fact that he took that approach and he made this film be told through the female perspective. And again, I'm not saying this to girl power. No, I'm saying it in terms of what we have to deal with in such a patriarchal society.
Right.
Women are the one that have to put up with everything. I mean, it's true. And I think I was reading a few articles. I've been fascinated with this film. I have I've lost count of how many interviews with him I've read, but he did mention that women at the end of the day, particularly mothers and daughters, in terms of mothers, they're the ones that go out there looking for their lost children. Again, resembling La Llorona again, which I'm telling you, this is just brilliant what he does with this story.
Yeah.
But yes, women are the ones that go out there seeking their lost children, and they are, again, we always get the short end of the stick, particularly in this
Hmm.
patriarchal society. And the fact that, like you said, his camera work in this, oh man, it's just genius. And how he was
Yeah.
able to, you open the film with the group of women, but you see their faces, you see their states of mind, psychologically, physically, everything. And then you go sideways right after the title, and you just see the men again, like you said, running away, but you only see the sideways aspect of it. Here,
Yeah.
when first, of course, you see the women and everything that they've experienced and what's about to come too. So yes, again, brilliant, brilliant,
Yep.
brilliant.
That night, the general is awoken by loud sobbing and running water, two things heavily associated with La Llorona,
Mm-hmm.
and he investigates, gun in hand, but finds nothing. And man, just this. I specifically want to call out this shot where it's like looking in on two rooms at once. It's like a camera
Yes.
angle pretty wide. Oh my goodness gracious, that looks good.
And it just stays there. So you know something's about to happen. It does not move. It just sits there. It gave me a lot. It reminded me a lot of The Invisible Man. Kind of
Yes,
like those shots that you just sit there at the window and you know something's there, or is it? You don't know. And it's just
exactly.
those buildups. Yes, such a great performance. They're just great, just framework there.
Right, right. And he's sure that this is a spy. And
Mm-hmm.
when his wife notices he's gone and follows after her or after him, he almost shoots her and then tries to choke out one of the staff. And again, speaking of women sort of bearing the brunt of the follies of men,
Yeah.
this guy hears something that isn't there, almost shoots his wife and chokes out a female member of his staff. Like, and they all just have to shrug it off.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's very I don't want to sympathize with anybody, but it does go to the extent as well as what PTSD does to you to some
Sure.
extent, because at the end of the day, what's getting this man are his past ghosts and everything he's responsible for doing. And again, yeah, the what he's able to communicate in terms of women, the wife, his daughter, his granddaughter, what they have to encounter, what they have to go through. And I'm pretty sure we're just going to talk about another scene later down the road that's just one of those scenes that
Yeah.
uh, where all three of them, again, have to go through that. So it's certainly, yeah, I just, again, it's something, like you said, we have to deal with it. And again, we
Yeah.
have to, like you just exactly, I think those are the best words to use. We just have to rub it up and just continue living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody else heard the crying. And the staff discuss that they think it's La Llorona coming for him
Mm-hmm.
in a Mayan language that notably the family hasn't bothered to learn.
Right.
This is again sort of one of the stratification points where people who they claim that they're like family to them. Like they talk about how one of them has been with them for so long, and how they've provided the roof over their heads, and they haven't bothered to learn the language that these people communicate in,
Yeah.
and and it just sort of shows how shallow a lot of the gestures that they might make really are at their core.
Yeah, it speaks volumes of the class differences and, of course, the class disparities and colonialism. They come, they take over their lands. You have to learn our language. Indigenous, the people that work with them know Spanish. They have to, because that they're being oppressed, and that's what you have to do. You have to do what we say. You have to learn our language. You have to practice our religion. You have to do and live in our little world. And like you said, yeah, they've never bothered to learn the Mayan language, and they never will, to be honest. But yeah, it says a lot.
The next morning, all the staff want to leave, scared of what's coming. But the general's wife, Dona Carmen, calls them all ungrateful, which is laughable. It truly made me laugh when she says they're all ungrateful. It's just a job. It's just a job, and she's like, you'll never find anyone who treats you as well as we do. And the daughter pleads with them to have pity, since her father is so sick with Alzheimer's. But they stand firm, and they say that they're going to leave. This is when we learn, if you weren't already aware of the cultural context, this is when they sort of reveal that the trial that they've been talking about is about the genocide of the indigenous population. And we see the halting testimony of an elderly woman and the violence visited upon her village by the order of the general that forced them to flee into the mountains. And it's obviously very traumatic. And as she continues, the audience behind her starts to take on a new feeling as she recounts the story in front of everyone, especially as the camera pulls back and reveals more and more people watching. But she demands justice, which I think that is so important. The fact that she says, like, people are watching now. And so I'm not ashamed to tell my story as long as it comes to the point, like, the only answer to this story is justice. And so that's what makes it worth it. Which I think says a lot. She's also released from the stand as witness 82, which one, I think, indicates just how many people are willing to be on the record about these atrocities, but also I think is probably a reference to Victoria 82.
Interesting. That scene is perhaps my favorite scene of the whole film.
It's so powerful.
Yeah. And again, here we go. I went down my rabbit hole and read interviews and so on. And apparently this is an actual survivor of the event. And she asked that she was willing to be part of the film, and she was willing to give her testimonial as long as they allowed her to tell her story. So what we see in this film, all those details, is what she actually experienced. And again, which explains why it's such a powerful scene.
Yeah.
And it's shot so beautifully, and man, I can't get over how this film, particularly this scene, has stayed with me since I first watched it. And after learning about that and learning that she is actually a survivor and this was actually her story. And I think some of the people that were sitting behind her are actual activists that are still seeking justice for all the victims that continue to experience a lot of trauma and so on and so forth. So yeah, my favorite scene of the film is this one. And yeah, it's certainly when they do dismiss her as witness number 82, again, like you said, it does speak volumes of the amount of people that have experienced this. But I'm like, they just give her a number. They can't even call her by her name or anything like that. True. Either, which kind of like dehumanizes her in a way. And it was quite, I was like, wow.
Yeah, it's complicated emotions, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Outside the courtroom, Dr. Natalia Monteverde played two great. She is really Sabrina de la Hoz is really just incredible in this movie. Everyone is kind of bringing the heat, but holy cow, I think that she's really the star actor in this, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes,
she's so good, but. She's lost in thought as a news team sort of provides some backstory and ties in the real-life events. One thing that I didn't notice the first time, that I did notice the second time through, that really helps add to the sort of the sense of paranoia, is the doctor gets given tea, but the bodyguard tastes it first because they're scared of poisoning, much like the general was scared of a spy the night before.
Right.
So a lot of little sort of touches that really add up to a nice focused movie. But back in the courtroom, despite the general's protests, the judge finds him guilty and states that the damage done is incomprehensible not only to the direct victims, but to the social fabric of Guatemala, pointing out that a substantial portion of the deaths were under 12 years old. So basically, a future generation of people affected an incomprehensible amount. It's really tragic, especially when you consider the numbers that we get are almost assuredly underreported just because of how many people aren't there to tell their story anymore.
Exactly. And how they're not there to tell their stories, and others feel like there's no use to it. There's no use for it. Why am I gonna expose myself? And at maybe they might think they're gonna be an easy target, or anything of that sort. That there's gonna be no true outcome, no justice
Right.
at all. Yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty sure the number's way more astronomical than this.
Yeah. There is much rejoicing at this guilty verdict, and the general appears to have a heart attack, getting rushed to the hospital. Dr. Monteverde is questioning herself and her familial ties, and she asks her mother if she thinks that her father did it. And her mother immediately pushes back and says, "Oh, you believe these people who've clearly been paid to lie over your own father?" And the doctor has to kind of reckon with her own memories that substantiate the women's claims. And so it's clear that there is this intergenerational conflict as the ripple effects continue to spread. You know, like you said, it's not, you don't like want to sympathize with these people, but you can also see why she wouldn't want to believe her father capable of such abhorrent acts, especially when we see him like laying the charm on his nurse and whatever. And you know, her mom isn't exactly making it easy. She's asking her what side she's on. She's getting defensive and asking which of the commies convinced her to become a lefty instead of caring about justice or accountability.
Yeah.
And she insists that what's in the past is in the past and they need to move on to heal. But we, as an audience, and well, hopefully everyone in the audience knows that that's not the case, that there needs to be justice in order for healing to happen.
Right. I think the film does a really good job. And yes, it doesn't necessarily make you sympathize. Well, it depends how you interpret the film, of course. But it certainly does make you think. It leaves you in a sense of contemplating what would you do in her shoes? What would you do if you were the daughter of this person? How would you
Right.
react? How would you, what would you do? Okay, so if she finds out these events are true, what do you do? You know, it's always this conflict of, I don't want to say interest, but it's this dilemma of you don't choose who's your family, right? So
Right, right,
it's in a sense, it's like, it's not like he's my friend. Yeah, whatever. I can just no longer be associated with them. This
right.
person's going to be my father for the rest of my life. So what do you do about it? How do you react? How do you approach this? How do you continue to live? And I think it first it starts when her daughter tells her that she's hearing all these rumors about her grandfather and people are talking and there's this gossip going on, and she tells her mother, who in this case is the daughter of the general. And again, it's having those family ties to people like this that the film perfectly executes and leaves you contemplating as to, okay, so what would you do? And it certainly, it leaves you thinking, but at the same time you don't know what to do, because I
Right.
mean, me personally, if I were in those shoes, I frankly would not know what to do. I would probably I would probably do what she's doing, continue to care for family, and because she does care for him.
Yeah.
She like, after he's which I'm pretty sure we're going to get into, she continues to care for him on a health basis,
Right.
and as well as the mom. So yeah, it's just a difficult position to be in. Difficult
It
position.
certainly is.
Yeah.
Putting it mildly, even.
Yeah.
Sort of as you alluded to, while he's in the hospital recovering from this heart attack, the trial is annulled on a technicality. And the general is released to his home where his daughter is going to be his primary caretaker. There's a lot of stuff thrown at their vehicle as they enter the grounds. And one thing that I really like is there's sort of an absurd disconnect from reality where Carmen is like, they hit us with paint. They're savages. When this guy literally did genocide.
Exactly. One of the questions she asks is, "Oh, did they steal anything? Like, what? And it was some of my jewelry or anything." I'm like, "Are you serious?" The privilege of these people.
Yeah, and Carmen instructs the one remaining staff member, Valeriana, to call up some people from her hometown that want to work. Again, very privileged to just say, call up some friends. We need new staff members. But the general is lying down, and a gust of wind blows the white drapes. Again, La Llorona sort of associated with a white dress. And it's really interesting to me how he kind of deconstructed it into its like sort of core elements and just littered them around in addition, you know, like they just kind of exist already setting up this incredible environment for it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that was certainly a memorable scene for me as well, particularly when it starts when they announce the annulment through via television, and then he gets released from the hospital. They take him to his home, and the disconnect is certainly something that it's so unbelievable. But unfortunately, it's true. It's reality, and to see the power that these people have in terms of politics and at one point even corruption, it speaks volumes of class disparities, and unfortunately, in this case, the oppression that still continues to haunt the indigenous people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in addition to this deconstruction of the legend into its elements, it's also been magnified in a really interesting way because this is where the sound design really comes back into play. Now, this huge crowd that's outside of the mansion protesting this release and this annulment of the court case, instead of one wail, it's the lament of a huge crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And when the general looks outside, he sees their memorials. It's 1,000 ghosts of dead mothers, of children, of fathers as well. It's sort of takes this story and really blows it up to cover so many people who are feeling the same emotions and despair that is associated with the ghost.
Yes, and the number of people you see out there is a slight little fraction of perhaps all the lives his decisions and his orders have impacted. And I think the introduction of what we consider here La Llorona is certainly another powerful moment in the movie when she just stands out from the crowd. As difficult as you may find that to be, just how she walks through them, and it's literally, like you said, just a wave of people just mourning and grief and seeking justice for their loved ones.
Yeah.
And when she appears, I internally cheered. I don't know why, but it was certainly one of those moments where I'm like, yes, please.
Oh, yeah.
I need some justice here. Come seek some justice on behalf of all the people that are surrounding you.
That's absolutely right. And so Alma does appear, which, for those of you who don't know, her name means soul in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And she has long black hair. She's clad in white dress. They assume that she is from Valeriana's hometown. Turns out not to be the case, but They don't know that yet. And water seems to start running spontaneously around her as well. But Dr. Monteverde's daughter is immediately smitten and wants to grow her hair long and wear a dress like Alma and show her around. And there is, again, sort of a commentary on privilege happening here in terms of this girl who doesn't really know what happened, and ignorance is bliss kind of attitude that she has, where she's very happy. She notices differences in their stations and everything, but is trying to treat them the same way. But also wants to appropriate their look and take pieces of their culture for herself. And I think that there is the youngest daughter doesn't have a ton of screen time, but the way that they use her is extremely effective, I think.
I agree. Certainly, she's certainly that the only sign of hope, of innocence, of like non malicious intent. I did like the fact that when she first comes in, the Alma comes in, the little girl, she's very like, oh, I like your hair. I want to have your dress. I want to do this. And again, she's the only happy and joyful spirit person in that scene. And
Yeah,
again, it's her child, just being a child, and like you said, being ignorant, and in a sense that you don't know any. When you're a kid, you're just free and you're just being yourself, and you
yeah.
just want to be out there. So yeah, certainly, like you said, she's not on screen for lots of time, but when she does appear, she certainly serves her purpose.
We also get another really great framing shot as Alma settles in, and we see Valeriana brushing her hair in another room through the bunks of the
Mm-hmm.
bed. I also really like that the movie really reinforces the idea of stagnation without justice, though, because when Valeriana asks how everyone at home is, Alma just says they're there. That it doesn't seem like people can move on without justice. There is this sort of being stuck because of the way that PTSD and the associated ramifications of the actions done to you can hold you back.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's certainly yeah. If there's no justice, there's certainly no way you can heal.
That's right. There's some more playing around with the trappings of La Llorona, with Alma hanging her head over the bed and letting her hair drape down and soaking her face in a tub of water with the camera submerged so she looks drowned. But the next day, the family is sort of staring out the window as the protests have trapped them inside, when some stones with pictures of the deceased wrapped around them shatter through the window. And in the panic, Sarah, the youngest daughter, seems to go missing. And when Dr. Monteverde finds her, it looks like Alma is drowning her. Though again, we find out that she's just being taught how to hold her breath. So,
Mm-hmm.
and this is where we find out that from Sarah, even not from Alma, that she had two dead children. Again, sort of using the pieces of this legend and inserting them into this story in ways that feel very naturalistic.
Yeah, just to remind us that she's still roaming around, and how the movie utilizes the symbolism of water. Certainly a fascinating way
Yeah,
to do it, from the sink and her just walking by and then automatically just turning on. And yeah, the buckets of water, the pool, the bathtub, all just these little pieces of nuggets that um, are utilized just to remind us of the legend.
right. And this whole time, Bustamante is also really hammering home these themes that he wants to talk about as well. To get back to sort of the way that women are put upon by men.
Mm-hmm.
That night, the general wakes up to the sound of crying again and sees Alma swimming outside. He hides when she comes in, then follows her, and it becomes sort of very surreal in that we're not sure if it's a dream or not, but we're kind of seeing through his perspective. And there's a layer of water on the ground, and Alma is washing her gown in an overflowing tub. And they
Mm-hmm.
stare at each other for a little bit until Carmen breaks the spell by turning on the light. And there's no water on the ground, and Alma is just a scared girl in the bathroom, cornered by the powerful man who employs her.
Right. Oh, yeah, that was the scene I was talking about earlier. Certainly, yeah, it was a little creepy in that sense. But after a second watch, I don't know if you noticed that when Alma was sitting in the bathtub, and of course she has her back towards the camera, and she's like, she has the white dress, but at one shot, where she's looking back, she has the dress like in a form of like she's carrying a baby, so to speak.
Oh,
Oh my god, I saw that, I was like, wow. It
oh
was just one
man.
of those shots that I was like, and my mind just blew away. And to just see that there was quite Again, I was just fascinated by all of this. But yeah, if you get a chance, just check that little scene out. And she literally has to dress, but she stops, she looks back, and if you look at it, it looks like she's carrying a child, like a baby.
Wow. Great
Yeah,
excuse to go watch it again, as far as I'm
yeah.
concerned.
But yes, again, it's one of those scenes that women just another showcase of what
Yeah.
women have to go through, and just to see that he was actually aroused, to put it in
Yeah.
better
Oh, yeah.
terms,
That also, I
was
didn't mention it, but
I was like,
it's
wow,
visible.
yeah. And again, we have to put up with it, rub it off, and continue living.
Yeah,
So unfortunate, and then
definitely.
how again, it just speaks volumes of the patriarchy and how it's so embedded in our psyche, instead of him trying to change. You can't change people, I understand that, but trying to deal this differently, you always blame women for whatever happens. If we are in a domestic violence incident, why didn't you leave or whatever. In this case, they have her change her dress attire
Oh my
because she
gosh, yes.
was provocative about it. Which again, here we go. It's just, I guess, all of those little elements incorporated in this is what makes me love this film even more.
Yes, I think it certainly does bring to mind the culture of sort of victim blaming and oh well,
Yes.
look at what you were wearing, you were asking for it, and it's like it's literally the same outfit that literally everyone wears on the
Yeah.
staff. It's a
Yeah.
uniform. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah. But she was,
Um,
I guess, too provocative for him. So.
well, yeah, certainly a negative portrayal of the way that this sort of thing is handled, but the family tries to basically continue on normally, but the protests outside continue to hammer against the walls. It's just sort of an omnipresent reminder of the sins of the father, literally, in this case, that idiom is being used. And as the protests continue, Carmen is finally starting to be affected by it as well. She wets the bed in fear after having a nightmare that she was running away from her husband's men.
Mm-hmm.
I love the scene where Alma and Sarah are looking out the window and they get shooed away by Natalia, who looks at what they were doing and sees that there's a man staring up at them who looks just like the man on the missing poster. And this question that it embeds into your mind of like, first of all, a lot of people just go missing during genocides like this, where no one is, they never get confirmed dead. It's sort of assumed that that is what happened to them, but
Right.
people just vanish, especially when there are like secret police and stuff like there were. And so it makes you ask this question of, is he a ghost from the genocide? Is he someone hungry for justice who has made his way back to the protests? You know, he's haunting them, but that phrase is so evocative and it covers so much, and this can kind of be applied to all of the meanings of haunting.
Yeah. Which goes again to say that I think this is becoming slowly but surely my best type of horror films. The ones that are in your subconscious, and the ones that it's pretty much your past actions and what you've done earlier in your life that come back to haunt you. Pretty much karma in a way. So in a way, I mean, I understand certain aspects of it and so on, and how revenge isn't always necessarily the best way out, blah blah blah. But when it comes to terms of genocide and to this magnitude, just
Yeah, I think
because
we're allowed to
exactly, yes,
well, a little
absolutely,
revenge, I think,
yeah.
seems within reason.
Mm-hmm. And I love it. I love the fact that he has literally his ghosts are literally physically outside protesting, or
Yep,
those who are protesting on behalf of their loved ones, and then you have one inside the house as well.
that's
Um,
right.
so
Um,
I think this is sweet revenge, and I love it.
Carmen cries after having another nightmare, and
Yeah.
the general discovers mold behind the bed, and he attributes all their issues to that. But Valeriana claims it's black magic and attempts to cleanse him. And while cleaning the mold, Valeriana confronts Alma about not being from her hometown at all after hearing that her friends don't know her. And Alma reveals that she doesn't know her age, but that she comes from the deepest parts of the mountain near the military camps. And again, sort of just like with the man that we saw outside, these vagaries kind of work for someone who has just been swept up by the path of war and who might lose track of how old they are. You know, you're not necessarily keeping track of birthdays the same way when you're in the middle of a civil war. And so it works for vagueness of I have been swept up in this war, but also creates an ethereal and timeless feeling like she's indeed the soul of these Mayan people, and that she really is there sort of like as this time immemorium vengeful spirit who is there to represent all the people who might just be swept up in the path of war.
Yes. Yes, this is where we find out of who she is. Depends on how you want to interpret it, but yeah, to be La Llorona, of course, it's a legendary ghost that's been there, that's existed for a lot of years, lots of decades.
Right.
So in that terms, I don't know how old I am either. But no, yes, again, oh my god, I know I sound like a broken record, but the way that he can incorporate all of this into the film again, it's just brilliant.
Definitely.
Like my brains have been like I haven't been able to find them for a while because I've just been mind blown time after time.
Well, this is the movie that'll do it to you.
Yeah, yeah.
That night, still sort of transfixed by the idea of being underwater. Like Sarah has over and over again be like, "Oh, she's teaching me how to hold my breath. She's fascinated with the water." Sarah steals her grandfather's oxygen tank and submerges in the pool. And the first time that I saw this, I was like, "Oh, she's on the right side of history. She's trying to kill him." And no, she's just trying to go and swim.
Yeah.
But the bodyguard is up, but he gets led away by two small children, sort of implied to be the spirits of Alma's kid, who lead him away. And this allows the general to sort of wake up because the bodyguard isn't there to stop the daughter, Sarah. This allows the general to wake up confused and shoot at his granddaughter in the pool, clipping her arm. Sarah, well, first of all, a plague of frog appears. There's a whole heap of them. And while the family is looking at them, a group of kids appear draped in shadow in the backyard while the sobbing starts up again. And really, you know, like we said, it's been sort of minimalistic up to this point where they let the sound design do a lot of the work in terms of creating that atmosphere. But in this last sort of handful of minutes, you know, they really ratchet things up. And it does get legitimately creepy with like the kids out hanging out in the backyard and just draped in shadow. I think it's pretty creepy.
I think so too. I think that everything that happens in that scene, and particularly with the wife, and the dreams that she's having, and how she starts to pretty much be in the shoes of these people. At first, I was thinking, again, it's open to interpretation because he doesn't necessarily clear up if she is actually was part of this genocide and everything, and she just happened to marry him to find a way to get out of this, or if this is actually the La Llorona or the spirit putting this. I think it's more of what I'm about to say now. Putting this in her head so she can actually feel what it's like to be in their shoes, particularly after the second dream and the sequence and how it ended. So in that term, I think it is certainly, again, I think the one of the best type of horrors is having for you to place yourself in other people's shoes, particularly in these type of incidents. You're literally running for your life, otherwise you're gonna die. And that shot and those sequences of seeing, it was very difficult for me to see this, but when you have the row of children, their bodies on the floor, in the dream sequence,
right,
that was, hard to swallow, hard to watch. Maybe because I'm a mother and I have kids. I don't know. I think anybody would be not bothered, but it wouldn't be easy to watch.
Right.
And for you to see that, for you to dream about that, and to actually experience it and be there, I think that's the best type of horror that you can
Yeah.
experience in that sense. And certainly we did have a lot of that in this film. But yeah, no, to bring it back to the end, to that third act, it certainly did. And all of a sudden we were going like at a really good steady what can we say, like, I don't know, like a speed limit, and then all of a sudden it just jumps up. It
Breaks
jumps
off.
up out of nowhere, and then it's just like bam. And yeah, it worked for me, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree that it's very satisfying for this sort of the pain and misery and trauma that they've inflicted now to be revisited back on them
Yeah.
is very satisfying, especially for it to be specifically for her to be in the shoes of the
Mm-hmm.
people going through it and to say it's not just equivalent. You now have to deal with exactly this.
Mm-hmm.
It's poetic justice, I think, as close as you can possibly get.
Yes.
I also think that it is interesting that when Sarah says that like the sobbing is Alma crying for her kids and that she's known the general for a long time, which first of all, also very creepy and also indicates that she is in fact a ghost. But Valeriana gathers everyone together to entreat their ancestors to protect them and get the other spirits to show pity. But one that I specifically want to call is that she says that if they have a debt with the general, it's not fair for innocents to pay for the consequences. And it's the idea of like that being the appeal here
Mm-hmm.
when so many innocents have already paid the consequences on his behalf.
Right.
I just thought it was really interesting that there is sort of this I don't want to say like blinders on, but it just doesn't feel realistic like the way that they treat this guy's crimes because it does sort of feel so grand, like on a grand scale. It's almost hard to comprehend how much damage one person did.
Yeah. It certainly is. And it does not, unfortunately, it's not surprising. And I think it's it's so difficult to try to collect my ideas when it comes to the impact he had, and it's such a huge impact. Not only to testimonial number 82, which again, that's a lot of people.
Yes.
And if you add those who were actually dead, and I think they were giving stats that like 30% or 35% were children under 12 years old, and
Right.
you see the visual, you get a visual on the dream. So on top of that, it's very it's difficult to try to get a whole grasp of everything he's done, everything he's responsible for, even though he probably didn't physically do it himself. His decisions and his orders certainly did.
Yes.
And it is at times quite difficult to grasp the idea, the magnitude of it. But again, it just speaks volumes of not knowing what a lot of these indigenous genocide, because there's been so many around the world. This is just one of the
Right.
very few that we currently know. And unfortunately, it's at times, I don't know, maybe subconsciously we don't really want to um fully not accept it, but even think about it, because the tragedy of it, the grand scheme of it, it's just so painful. It's so
Yeah.
unfortunate that
Hard to reckon with.
exactly. And I guess this is where I once again I am fascinated by the del Toro aspect of it, the Guillermo del Toro, and to reflect that in reality, the real monsters and the real villains in this world are actually people and not necessarily ghosts or legends or stories and so on. So
Yeah.
just to see that grand scheme of it, it's certainly very difficult to
Yes.
touch or even think about. Yeah.
Um, Carmen from in the dream sequence, she's choking out the general, and when we cut back to reality, she is atop him doing the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
and he does die.
Right.
And at the general's funeral, another general walks into the bathroom,
Mm-hmm.
and now he hears a sob from the vent, and the water starts to rise from the urinals and flood, and it cuts to black as we hear a scream of "my children," and you're just, it's just what an incredible ending. This sort of like, all right, on to the next one. Who was responsible? Like, it's so satisfying to be like, yes, this.
Absolutely.
It's not just the one person. Everyone who is involved in this catastrophe needs to be held accountable.
Absolutely. And fitting that we end the film the same way we start with the funeral.
Yeah,
And that, yes, next one, next on her list. And go for it. I would not mind seeing sequels of this film because certainly it's something I'd definitely be up to watching. But
and the song over the end credits kicks ass too.
yeah,
It's so good.
absolutely. La Llorona. I love it. I love everything about it. And yeah, just best way to end this and such justice. Sadly, the government's not giving it to me, so I have to take matters in my own hands. Yeah.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And now, Rosa, we reach the part of the episode where we sum up why this is not just a good horror movie, but is in
Mm-hmm.
fact the best horror movie, whatever that means to you.
Right.
And I'll let you start.
Yes, this is the best horror movie, in my opinion, because of the social commentary aspect of it. Because it's a raw and unfortunate reminder that the true villains, the true monsters on this earth are men, are human. Majority of the times men.
Yeah.
So it's certainly a movie that no, it does not benefit from those jump scares. Mainstream Hollywood has so much spoiled us with. This is more of a realistic horror film, realistic in terms of what a certain demographic, in this case, indigenous people, everything they've had to encounter, and everything they continue to encounter, and unfortunately will continue to encounter because of people like this general, because of people who think that they are subhuman on a level just because of their skin color, because of the culture, because of how they speak, how they look. And unfortunately, if we continue to ignore these type of ideals and these type of mindsets, then it's just not going to get any better. And I think it's also, like I just said, one of the best horror films because it's pretty much a mirror of society and how these powerful people can oppress demographics, minority groups, in a sense. And it's unfortunately relevant because, like I said, in one of those scenes, you have people who are still advocating for justice for their loved ones, for their ancestors. So it's relevant and it's a more realistic look to the horrors of humans.
Yeah, I totally agree. To me, this is the best horror movie ever made because although I'm not particularly religious, I grew up Jewish, and you hear every time that Holocaust Remembrance Day comes around, you hear never again, never again. And unfortunately, that's not the case. So many times people and indigenous groups in particular are taken advantage of, and the idea that these kind of things happen and people just don't even hear about it. We're connected like never before, and we can learn so much, but things like this still sort of slip under the radar. That I had never heard of the silent genocide prior to this movie coming out, and that is what this movie is representing, and why it's so important is because it shows how impactful movies can be and how horror movies in particular are able to reflect some of the more serious thought-provoking issues that people need to examine. And it would be one thing if the movie just did that, but the fact that it is also an incredibly well done on a technical level movie, has some freaking great performances, and is scary through the sound design and deliberate placement of imagery instead of just jump scares. I think to me that's what makes this the best horror movie ever made. Thank you so much for coming on, Rosa. This was so much fun, and I really want to encourage people to have them check out your podcast. So please tell people where they can find your work.
Thank you for inviting me. This was certainly a treat. Yes, my podcast Latinx Lens is found on every podcast platform, and we are also on every social media platform at Latinx Lens. And then my personal social media account, I'm also on Twitter, Instagram at Rosa's Reviews. And again, thank you. This was such a treat, and thank you for allowing your platform to talk about one of these films, because it's certainly, again, not talked about enough, and it is certainly one that deserves to be seen.
Yes, absolutely. I was thrilled to do it. I am very hopeful that we'll be hearing more about this movie as the Oscars draw closer. People keep an eye out for it. Like I said, this is a story in progress. So who knows what the future holds for La Llorona. And as far as my plugs, you can find me on Twitter at Little Horror PHL. You can also find me on Patreon if you want to support the show and get great stuff like bonus episodes, including an awesome one about Solaris. And sometimes there will even be video episodes as well when we feel like doing that sometimes. So keep an eye on the Patreon. That's patreon.com/Little Horror PHL. And rate and review the show if you're enjoying it. That's it. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.